tuned into the Awakening Zone Radio Network, your news and information source for empowered spiritual awakening.
I am that I am. Адамус, of sovereign domain, here for the Crimson Circle and Shambra from all around the world who are opening themselves to embodied enlightenment in this lifetime. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to those who are gathering in this now moment, all who will listen to this at some time in the future. You are just as much with us right now as those who are listening in online. Let's take a deep breath to really get these energies in a flow. I see that there were some technical problems. Let's take a good deep breath as Linda was just doing with each and every one of you. And as we do, I ask you to invite in the energies of Sam. Up until now, it has not even been appropriate to go into such a discussion about Sam. His energy wasn't ready for it. He was in his own manner of finding himself, which I'll explain in just a moment. So until now, not even ready for it. But now we can start talking about Sam, and there will come a day when Sam talks as himself with a knowingness of who he is, where he has come from, the past lives that he has had, even his self as Tobias. As you take a deep breath and invite Sam in, he is not necessarily consciously aware in his human state of being right now. Late in the afternoon, back at home, he's taking a walk through the forest after a day of fishing. He does indeed love fishing because it provides quiet and solitude for him. He's walking back home, coming through some of the wooded areas, quiet areas, and he feels something going on. As you can imagine, he feels a warmth and a glow all around him. He feels himself suddenly very multidimensional, very timeless. He feels his body is very light. He feels that there is no time whatsoever. He feels that he is in the warmest, friendliest of energies. But his human mind right now doesn't quite understand why he suddenly had this amazing shift of consciousness. And where so often he feels alone, he spends a lot of time by himself or reading books. Suddenly, he doesn't feel alone, even though he is walking alone, but suddenly he feels he's surrounded by warm and loving energies. As you feel into Sam, you're probably also going to feel some overlays or undercurrents of the Tobias energy. And again, Tobias has not and will not come in tonight to channel, has not come in the past because the focus has been on Sam. He has indeed been aware of what all of you are doing, of your trials and tribulations with embodied awakening in this lifetime. He is aware of the work that I am doing with you. He is aware of the deep love each and every one of you have for life, in spite of the fact that it can be so challenging. Actually, life isn't challenging at all. It's only other humans. You can do a T-shirt about that. So in our presentation, our discussion, there is so much to cover. I'm going to do it by general categories. There's so much to discover, but this whole time I ask you to simply feel into the energies of Sam. So to begin with, Sam is indeed a young man, just going through the final stages of puberty, still discovering the hairs in the new places on his body. I'm talking about his facial hair and starting to come with a little bit of chest hair and really going through the very typical puberty process. And remember that this is an ascended master, Tobias, who's coming back now as an incarnate being. But I want you to pay very close attention to this. I want you to feel into this because, well, it is about your journey also. So many of you are thinking, well, if he's an ascended master, doesn't he bypass all the processes? Doesn't he suddenly know everything, even at 14 years old? Can't he just go beyond puberty, not have to go through its struggles and everything? But hear me carefully on this. The Creator gives freedom to all of their creations. And even in creating this being, this identity known as Sam, even though it is Tobias's creation and it will be the house of the soul of Tobias in this lifetime, when Tobias created this shell body known as Sam, Tobias had certain desires, certain feelings of love, certain hopes and aspirations for this being, which is also himself, but this being known as Sam. And when he imagined Sam, he also gave Sam freedom. So Sam is Sam. It is the creation of Tobias. But as a loving creator, Tobias gave Sam freedom. In other words, Sam could turn his back on Tobias. He hasn't, but he could. Sam could, on his own, decide that life was too hard, and he could terminate his life early or at any time. Sam could actually be in direct defiance to Tobias, and Tobias would honor and respect this. Because you see, the true soul being, the one we call Tobias, even though that's actually not his real name, but the soul gives freedom to all of their creations. So Sam, in a way, is also a very unique and very free personality. So you can see there's part of Sam that is just a boy or young man, part of Sam that even though he is the creation of an ascended master and will have a relationship with the ascended master, there is still that part of him that is just Sam. You see, it is like your own relationship with Source, with Creator, God, whatever you choose to call it. This Source imagined itself on an amazing journey of discovery, of knowingness, of learning of itself, and in doing so created you and gave you freedom. All the freedom in the world, no rules, the freedom to absolutely, if you choose to, turn your back, even on your soul. He gave your soul the freedom to experience anything that it chose to create. And your soul does so when it creates the expressions of itself. And there's a very beautiful, unique expression of itself, of your soul. And it's that being, that human that you see in the mirror. It's you. And you can turn your back on your soul. You can defy your soul. You could pretend your soul is not there. You can terminate your own life, your own incarnation, and the soul still loves you. Or you can see yourself as the expression, the materialization and the manifestation of your soul. You can integrate with your soul. You can love yourself as your soul loves you because you're truly one. But yet, in this interesting dynamic, you also have total freedom. Your soul will never punish you. Your soul will never judge you. Your soul will never walk away from you. So you can see now, even the relationship between Sam and Tobias, even Tobias being an ascended master still gives his creations freedom. And that's the beauty and once in a while the curse. And to each and every one of you, you are your soul, but you also have your freedom. You can turn to your soul, you can love your soul as it loves you, and then watch the magic happen. I digress a bit. With a drink of water for Cauldre, we get back on topic. Sam, a 14-year-old boy. Let's talk first about some of his more everyday things going on in his life, and we'll work our way up to now the metaphysical, the spiritual aspects. Sam has had what you would call a challenging 4 years, the past 4 years. He is a very deep and introspective person. He loves spending time alone, but finds sometimes that he gets tied up in his own mental trap by having too much time alone. But yet, when he tries to socialize with others, with most others, he finds it to be frustrating at times. He finds that he doesn't really resonate with other people so well. Part of him thinks that these last 4 years have been so difficult after his accident, partly because of the divorce of his parents, his father then moving to another city about almost 2 hours away from where he is, and he sees his father maybe once or twice a month, and they get along with each other, but it's not a warm, friendly relationship. It is one of mutual tolerance, I guess you would say. So he's the type of young man that doesn't have a lot of friends, even though they tend to want to be his friend. But he finds a way of pushing them off. You see, he has a type of energetic magnetism, a charm that people love just to be around him. Sam has been likes to go fishing, likes to spend that time by himself, also likes to take long walks by himself. He has a few close friends. One of his dear friends, his name is Steve. Another, and yes, that's a real name. Another friend is Samuel, just like Sam, but Samuel. And another friend whose name is Naji, a young Indian boy. And with these, he is very close to. He will spend time on the computer with them. Sometimes they'll go fishing with Sam, but sometimes Sam will make sure nobody will go with him just so he can be alone. The three boys created a business of their own. Of course, Tobias being very entrepreneurial, and they've been doing a lot of yard work this summer and making money. And Sam is using his money to do things like buying clothes and buying some of the latest electronic gizmos that are out there. Sam is quite handsome, actually, still at that awkward stage that a 14-year-old boy would be at. But when you look at his face, you can see the fine features, the strong features that he has. He has a lot of hair in his head. It always seems to be rumpled no matter how much he tries to comb it. It's always wavy and it's long. He prefers to keep it a little bit longer. Now that he's starting to get some facial hairs, it's actually defining his face even more as a man. Very, very handsome, and he has a beautiful, perhaps you would say one of his most stunning features is his eyes. He has what you would call light brown, maybe hazel-colored eyes, and the eyes, they shift colors quite a bit, sometimes appearing green, sometimes even darker brown, but very deep and very, very warm eyes. So when a person sees him, they're immediately attracted to this tassel of hair and these beautiful eyes. Sam is about 5'7" inches tall, so you can say that he's probably going to be 6 foot or even a little bit taller. Right now he's very lanky, very, very skinny. Even though he can eat just about anything, he tends to stay very slim, and this will all change in the next couple of years. His body will start to fill out. He's just now starting to notice his muscles, particularly after a lot of doing contract yard work, landscaping and that things, yard mowing and hedge trimming. His muscles are starting to develop, and he's just starting to notice that. And the women, the girls, are starting to notice it also. Sam isn't particularly fond of meats. He prefers lighter foods. He'll eat a lot of fish, a little bit of chicken. Oddly enough, he does like lamb from time to time, but he's not the type that is fond of burgers or steaks or any of the heavier foods. He loves fruit, not so fond of vegetables, and he has very, very little sugar in his diet. He finds that the sugar kind of shocks his body, and he doesn't feel very well when he has this. Sam's mother was very ill earlier in the year, particularly from about January through April. Thought she had the flu, but the doctors never could really find out what was wrong with her. And we know, you and I know, that it was more of an energy reaction because particularly for the last 4 years, she's been in this struggle with Sam. For a long time, he was just a quiet, mild-mannered boy up until the time he was about 10 years old. She really didn't have any problems with him. She didn't understand him very well, and they didn't have what I would consider to be a close or warm relationship, but it wasn't a negative relationship either. And suddenly, about 4 years ago, Sam started asking a lot of questions, and Sam started being more demanding of her attention, her affections, and her love. And because of her background, because of the way she was brought up, she really wasn't ready to give that. Then combined with all the stress of the divorce, which involved Sam's father having an affair with another woman, this caused tremendous stress on her to the point where it all finally caught up, and she got very, very sick for quite a while earlier this year, to the point where she's now blaming it on the town that they live in and living conditions and things like that, and she's very seriously contemplating moving to most likely Northern California. Sam doesn't know anything specific about that, but it has kind of underlying knowingness that something is probably going to change in his life, and he will probably not be happy about it, at least at first. It's very difficult for a 14, 15, 16-year-old to suddenly be moved to a new location. But as you and I already know, it is going to be yet the next part of his journey, of his discovery. Sam has been a lukewarm student, which is interesting. His grades are all right, but not particularly good. You would think that an ascended master would be able to ace every course, but Sam is not terribly interested in what the schools have to teach. He goes, he does the basics, he gets through his classes, he's generally well-liked by his teachers, but he's not that interested in the studies. He finds them boring and tedious, and he doesn't know how to define it yet, but he finds it to be a very old energy. He'll come upon this word soon enough, but he finds them to be very tedious and boring. In school, he does much better in things like history. He's very interested in the history of civilization of the planet. He is very good in things like economics, even though he's only had a little exposure towards it. He's fascinated with economics and money balance, although he doesn't particularly care for math. He's quite good in writing. He's a very, very good writer, particularly for his age. Doesn't care much for science. And he loves music. His mother forced him to learn to play the piano, which he's adequate at it, not particularly great, but he's adequate. But he loves listening to a variety of different kinds of music. He's not so interested in pop music, but he loves the classics, and he loves music that has soul. And yes, he actually likes country western music quite a bit. If you remember Tobias talking at one point about country western music being wonderful because it's the story of humanity, maybe not the best in terms of the music itself, but the story that it tells. Sam is slowly learning to play the guitar. He loves stringed instruments, and he finds that he's fairly natural with the guitar, but I have to say does not have much of a singing voice, at least not right now. Sam loves reading, but not the typical material. Yes, he reads some of the things that the boys his age will read, if they do read at all. But he loves reading philosophy. He has dived into many of the philosophical works, and his mother is amazed that he can even comprehend them, much less being so excited about a lot of the philosophers that even many of you have never read or studied. Now, he has read some of the pop philosophy, the things from Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and some of the others, but he's particularly keen on many of the philosophers like Francis Bacon and Descartes and some of the others. So he is very, very deep in his thinking. Now, a couple of things have occurred recently in his life. First of all, he is very curious about people. Oh, I'm going to back up first. One of his friends his parents own a small farm right outside of town. Sam found that he loved spending time on this farm, and he would actually go out there and offer to work, offer to do things, because he loved being around the land. He loved being around animals, and he found that, in addition, of course, to loving his own dog, that he had a natural way with animals. He actually found out that through trial and error that he could heal animals. He first noticed that they would tend to calm down when he was around. You know how oftentimes barnyard animals aren't interested in the humans, they're just interested in eating. But when Sam would come around, they would stop what they were doing and come up to him. The horses in particular just loving him, not even wanting food, but just loving his energy. One day he noticed that there was a sick cow, and the energy level was very off with this, and he was told that the veterinarian would be coming out to tend to this cow. Sam found that he could walk up to the cow and literally, and Sam doesn't know the words yet, but so I'm going to use words that all of us use. He could come up to the cow and he could feel the cow's energy. He could feel where the energy was low and where it wasn't flowing, and that if he stared at this, because his eyes are very special, if he stared at this part, he could see the illness or the energy imbalance, and just by gazing at it, it could help to heal it. And this happened on more than one occasion with many different animals on this farm. So Sam came to realize that there was something maybe a little different, a little special about him. That's been one of the issues with Sam, one of the challenges that he has had, because particularly for the last 4 years, he has had these differences of feelings, and feelings that go very, very deep. On one hand, he feels he was very different than other people, even than his mother, than the friends of the family and people he knows. But he's tried to squelch that. He's tried to say, well, no, I'm not supposed to feel that way. I should try to be like all of them. But yet, on the other hand, he knows clearly that he is different. He doesn't know how or why yet, but he knows clearly. Of course, now it will cause him many nights of lack of sleep and causing a lot of doubts and wondering what's wrong with him as well. But he'll get into the doubt, into the feelings of guilt that he should try to be more like the others, but yet he knows there is something different. He knows that other 14-year-old boys don't read philosophy and love it like he does. He knows other people aren't going to animals and healing them just by looking with his eyes, looking at the health that's actually there in the animal rather than the sickness that seems to be so prevalent on the surface. He knows that he has a different calling in life, but yet he feels awkward and strange about this when he's tried to talk to his mother or some adults about it. They basically dismiss him. They basically tell him that he'll get over it. His mother has been trying to encourage him to play sports, which he has very little interest in, very little at all. But his mother was so concerned last year, so concerned about him, what she called anxiety, that she took him to see a psychiatrist that specialized in young boys. And he went for about 4 or 5 sessions and basically refused to go anymore and demanded that he was not going to go anymore because he knew, sitting there talking to the psychiatrist, that he knew more than the psychiatrist knew. He knew that the psychiatrist was filled with a lot of mental concepts that the psychiatrist really did not have a true awareness and understanding. He used his eyes to see right into the psychiatrist's own imbalances. And even though there was this facade of him, psychiatrist, being a doctor and being wise and having diplomas on the wall, he could see right through that this man, this psychiatrist, did not know what was really going on. And furthermore, the psychiatrist was recommending that he go on some type of anti-anxiety medication. In fact, Sam didn't have what you would call a typical anxiety, but he would go very deep within himself, very, very deep with his thoughts, wondering basically, who am I? And why am I here? Why am I different? He would go so deep into them that there would be days and days where he would not talk to anyone else and lose all track of time, just wondering. At the same time, what his mother perceived as anxiety, what was happening to Sam is that Sam kept on having reoccurring, not dreams, but let's call them daydreams or thoughts about being trapped somewhere and not being able to get out, being trapped in a prison or in a cave or even locked and inside a house with no windows and no doorways. And this was driving him mad because he felt that he was in a prison. He had to get out. There had to be something more than what he was experiencing in life up until then. And he felt that this was driving him mad. Now, what he didn't realize, and still doesn't, was that there was a bleed-through of Tobias's time in a prison. But there was also his own relationship to this feeling of being imprisoned, because here he is, an ascended master. Here he is, a brilliant being, just like each and every one of you is, but trapped, imprisoned inside this thing called mass consciousness, the mental society. Here he is imprisoned within strict definitions and rules and religions and all these other things that are overlays for him and for all of you, screaming to get out because he knows that inside he is truly free, screaming to get out because he knows that magic is real, that miracles are possible, but they're not miracles at all. They're just multi-dimensional experiences. But here he is feeling trapped in the prison of 3D, of mass consciousness, of human controls and rules and guidelines. And he's got to get out. He's got to break through, but he doesn't know how. In a way, it's driving him a bit mad, but this tension, this being driven to kind of a feeling of insanity and desperation is what is eventually going to propel him out of this consciousness prison that he's within. And my dear friends, isn't that your story as well? In a way, isn't what Sam is going through as an ascended master incarnate in this sometimes rather harsh and dense and entrapping energy and consciousness? Isn't that what you're going through also? So in a way, yes, Sam's story is your story as well. That's why you're feeling such a deep resonance with this being who was trying to go through life, trying to go to school, trying to do the right thing, trying to get along with his mother, but yet having all these issues, being told there was something wrong with him, that he has to go see a psychiatrist, but absolutely refusing because something inside Sam knows the truth. Yes, at times it is clouded and confused and covered over by the outside world. But when Sam gets quiet, when he reads what some of the great minds have written, when he goes fishing in all of its simplicity and its beauty, when he daydreams, he remembers. Sam has recurring dreams that he doesn't quite understand yet, but he will soon enough. In these dreams, there is a very loving and wise older man, a man with a white beard, a man dressed in like a gown or a cape. And the man just watches over him, rarely talks, rarely says anything. Once in a while will say to Sam, "You are not alone." In a way, this troubles Sam because he doesn't know why this being keeps showing up in his dream. He's tried blocking it out. But in a way, he feels the friendship, the love, the comfort. And of course, you already know that this being is Tobias. They're with Sam. They're watching over, but never interfering, never has the soul being of Sam never demanding that Sam do anything, never forcing him, never setting rules or judgments, but rather just there. Showing up, yes, as Tobias might have looked back in his lifetime as Tobias. Showing up to let Sam know that he's not alone. To let Sam know that, yes, things can be challenging and difficult at times, but Sam will break through. Sam will come into his own. So Sam has so many questions right now and so much confusion about who he is. So much wondering about why he's here. He would try talking to his mother a lot, try asking her these questions, and she would always dismiss him. Always, she was too busy doing something, or telling Sam that these things weren't that important, that he would outgrow it, but he won't. You and I already know that. There was some resentment and guilt associated with the divorce with both parents, and the resentment coming a bit from Sam. Could not understand why they had to get into such a heated battle about the divorce, fighting over money and property, and even over the rights to when to see him or when they didn't want to see him. He couldn't understand why they couldn't just look each other in the eyes and say, "Thank you for the time that we've shared together. Thank you for what we've created together, and it's now time to go our separate ways." So he resented the arguing that took place between them, the many, many nights, very difficult nights of arguing and anger and things being thrown and words being said that could never really be taken back. So there was a resentment, and he found himself pulling away emotionally from both of them. Both of them feeling guilt, which was a little bit unusual because both of them being college professors, one teaching economics and the other teaching English and literature, both of them suddenly having feelings, deep feelings of guilt, and trying to deny those feelings. These are very unfeeling, insensitive parents in a way, which was perfect for Sam up to a point, but feeling a sense of guilt and not liking the sense of guilt, and then trying to cover up their own guilt by either pushing Sam even further away so the guilt wasn't right in their face, or trying to overdo it by buying him out, so to speak, buying him things even when they really couldn't afford it. That's why he eventually decided this last summer to get a job to make his own money, so he's no longer having to play the game with his parents, and he's done quite well. As a matter of fact, financially he will always do well. That's Tobias. Sam had an encounter with his mother recently that was very difficult, particularly, well, for both of them, but particularly for Sam. You see, Sam has never had a lot of friends, although he's always loved humans, but he doesn't know how to define this, but he finds the typical human energy to be too overwhelming. Everybody was trying to, feed on him, and he couldn't tolerate it, so he stayed to himself, and that's what got him reading so much. But people are attracted to him. He has a natural charisma, and putting it in another way, Sam is the type of young boy that would be the perfect feeding grounds for energy feeders, because there's so much love and there's so much balance there, and combined with his handsomeness and these beautiful eyes that he has, it was perfect. The feeders, the energy feeders, are the ones who steal energy like vampires from other people, emotionally and even physically, would be attracted to Sam. And he couldn't tolerate it, so that's one of the reasons why he shut down and closed off for the world. But of course, as he started going through puberty, Sam became even more interested in humans. Didn't want to be close, but was fascinated by the things humans do. A deep love, because through those eyes of his, he could see the potential in everyone. Fascinated by why they acted a certain way, but yet had deep inner feelings that were quite different. Why they said one thing and did another thing. Why they had such love within them, but acted so cruel to others. But that's why he basically shut off from others. But here he was, just in the last year or so in particular, really starting to notice the human body, and not just the physical part of the human body, not just what you see on the outside, the flesh, but the beauty of the human physical nature. Because his eyes are very special, and his hands are as well, but his eyes are very special, so he can see into a body for all that it has, and not just the physical, but the energy of the body manifest in physical form. He can see the imbalances just like he did in the animals, now able to start seeing that in people. And in particular, he took on a fascination for girls in particular, I guess, which would be somewhat natural. Fascinating these bodies of theirs, these physical bodies that birth other beings, these bodies that carry, and my words, not his, but these bodies that carry the goddess energy within them. He can see the energy, and where in a way, because of his very sensitive nature, he felt a bit assaulted by masculine energy. I didn't say by men, I said by masculine energy that can be carried by man or woman. But he felt a little overwhelmed by this harsh masculine energy. He started noticing the female energy, the female body, fascinated with it. Now, this isn't necessarily sexual, although I guess there is a little bit of that in there. This is more the fascination with the flow of energy through this vessel called the feminine body. Part of it was also because he was starting to discover his own feminine energy. Yes, he's a 14-year-old boy going through puberty, but all of you have masculine and feminine energy. He had never even considered himself having feminine energy. But suddenly, through other women, young women in particular, it helped him start to discover his own feminine balance. Now, of course, that had him wondering, was there something about him that preferred, that maybe he should have been a woman, or that he has something imbalanced. But then he realized he doesn't at all. He has a deep appreciation now for the masculine because he found the true masculine part of himself through the feminine. Sounds wonderful, but he started developing some very close relationships with young ladies. Again, they were drawn to him because of his charisma and his handsome looks. And he started developing a very close relationship, particularly with some of the deeper, more introspective girls, and a few who were a little bit older than him. And recently, he was at home in his bedroom with one of the girls and really sensing into and feeling the physical body, and they started to take off their clothes and not going to engage in sex because he's still, for one thing, he's not ready for that with his energy balance, and for another, he has such a deep respect for the feminine energy. But in his fascination, they both started removing their clothes, and they weren't fondling, but just what you would call sensing or lightly touching. Now, some of you are going to be using that as an excuse for yourselves and your behavior, but truly they were just feeling each other's energy when suddenly his mother came home unexpectedly. Doctor's appointment was canceled, and she suddenly was at home, opened the door in the bedroom, found her son with a slightly older girl on the bed without clothes. Her mother, not knowing, or his mother, not knowing how to handle anything like this, of course, got very emotional, started accusing him of all sorts of things, and felt once again her own guilt and shame for not being a better mother, but immediately called the father, who immediately drove down from the other city so they could both confront poor Sam about all of his exploits. And in an interesting way, brought the mother and father together for a mutual common grounds to then start drilling Sam. Of course, they'd never talked to him about sex, after which it was kind of a funny situation, but about a week after this incident happened, Sam's father was given the task of sitting down and talking to him about sex. And the funny thing is, Sam knew so much more about it, and while his father was awkward about the discussion, Sam wasn't one bit at all. This caused quite a tension between Sam and his mother. She accused him of looking at porno on the website, and which, by the way, Sam has seen some porno sites, as any 14-year-old boy was, but he was actually deeply offended, shocked that anything like that would be available, shocked that anything that had such a distortion of the beauty of the sexual act in the human body would even be out there like that. So no, Sam is not prone at all to looking at porn or any what you call abusive, pornographic, explicit or thoughts of women. He is actually fascinated by them. So this caused quite a bit of consternation between Sam and his mother, even more separation. And when the time comes when his mother is going to be moving, it may be that Sam doesn't even go with her, but caused a lot of tension, which caused even more Sam to go introspective deep within. His mother and father tried to make him feel ashamed about the human body, about sex, about women and relationships. Why? Because of their own relationship, about their own inadequacies with sex. And they tried to put this on him. But the beautiful thing about Sam was that while at first this barrage and assault by his parents had an effect on him, it actually made him stronger and more determined, and actually is one of the keys to helping him break out of this prison of thought and control and human consciousness. Just recently, within the last 8 or 9 days, Sam had a very interesting experience. It was his first conscious, mystical experience, and there will be many more that occur after this. Sam was walking home one evening from his friend's farm, walking by himself, and it was early evening. Sam loves just gazing at the stars. He'll sit in his bedroom and look out the window at the stars, or anytime he gets an opportunity. But here he was walking alone back to his house, looking up at the stars. It was a beautiful, fairly clear evening. And suddenly, while looking at one of the stars, it seemed to be coming closer and closer, getting brighter and brighter. Well, it scared Sam something fierce, because this, what appeared at first to be a star, got brighter and brighter, closer and closer, to the point where he froze in fear. And suddenly, this light appeared directly all around him. His first thought, after getting any sort of his control back, his composure back, was that this was a UFO and that he was being abducted. He had read about it in some of his internet searches and his book reading, but indeed it wasn't. As, by the way, a lot of these supposed abductions really aren't abductions. But here in Sam's case, what this was a light. And it did suddenly engulf him. It was like he was surrounded by this light. He could feel it. He could see it. It was so overwhelming that he wanted to scream out, but he couldn't. His voice literally locked. And suddenly this single brilliant light that had no heat to it, by the way. It wasn't like it was hot. And even though it was a brilliant white light, it didn't burn the eyes. But suddenly this brilliant white light turned into 3 beings who suddenly went from this bright light surrounding him. Suddenly they were outside of him, standing at a distance of about 2.5 meters. Each of these beings was quite tall, had somewhat human-like figures, but were totally silver, like a shining silver. So shining that it was difficult to see any real definition in their face. But he knew that 2 of the beings were women and 1 was a man. This was his perception, of course. But 2 had the feminine energy, 1 had the masculine. And these beings communicated to him not through words, but through knowingness, not even through mental thoughts, but through the knowingness, or the Gnost, and communicated to him that they were going to be his guardians for a period of time, at least for the next 7 years of his life. They explained to him that they were there to help keep the energies balanced, because now, in his 14th year and going forward, that he was going to be experiencing the occult. He was going to be experiencing the multidimensional nature of reality and starting to come to realize who he really is. And that it would be difficult to balance all of this with his everyday human life, going to school, being a young boy or a young man, associating with other people. they made it clear to him that they were not his, you would say, teachers or his angel guides. They didn't even look like angels. I'm just so happy we're getting over some of that angel stuff, particularly the stuff that was so popular, 10, 12 years ago. But that being said, these beautiful, glistening, silver-type beings are there to help Sam balance and maintain his energy, because as he opens up, as he comes out of this consciousness prison that he's been in for the last 14 years, he is going to find it difficult to maintain the flow of energy, the balance between the human and his divine, and particularly right now in the physical state of being, so that it doesn't affect him physically, but also in the emotional, mental state of being, so that he doesn't do this thing that you call going crazy. They were very clear to him that they're going to be with him, but not interfering with his life, not telling him what to do. They would be his energy balancers for a period of time. They would help him make the transition through the layers or the different levels that he was going to be going through in what they called his realization. They explained to him that indeed he was more than he knew himself to be. They didn't tell him his exact background and all the details, but they explained to him that indeed he was a grand being incarnate on earth, and that in these coming years he would be taken through a series of courses or discourses, discussions by the being that he keeps seeing in his dreams, this being with the white beard and the beautiful cape, this being that we know as Tobias, but that this being would start taking him through discourses or lessons about energy, lessons about consciousness, lessons about how to walk in multiple worlds at one time, and how to manage and respect his energy, but more than that, to honor and respect all other humans for exactly what they were choosing and experiencing in life. In other words, not to interfere, unless that human was choosing it. He has tremendous power that come through his eyes, and as you know, what would happen if he began interfering with others' paths and others' choices, that it would create a lot of problems, but he would learn about compassion. And true compassion is understanding when to allow somebody, always to allow, but when somebody's making their own choices and doesn't really choose to make real changes, and then when there are people who are choosing to make deep and life-altering changes. Now, he's going to learn the difference between somebody who just wants $1,000 more in their bank account, or somebody who just wants to add 5 years to their life, or have a better partner, or something like that, because those are trivial and they're relatively meaningless, and they're very human-oriented and generally end up working against the person. So he's not going to be doling out the favors. He's not going to be doing psychic magic for others. But he's going to learn through himself, through Tobias, how to really detect, how to see whether somebody really is ready to get out of their prison, really ready to experience true life, full, loving life. He's going to be trained in how to be aware when somebody is ready to actually love themselves, and then he will be in the place of providing guidance and insights and using his very special talents to aid and assist those who are really open to change, not just a few little improvements in their life, and not just garnering more power, which they'll use for abuse later on, but those individuals who have a deep and earnest and heartfelt desire to go beyond. So that's what he's going to be trained in. And these three very silver-like beings, beautiful beings that are going to accompany him, are going to help, at least for the next few years, probably for the next 7 years, help to keep the energy balanced, because all of you know what that's like, to be going through levels of deep, deep change and feeling so off balance at times, feeling like such a foreigner here, right here on Earth, in this very place that you helped to start and create, but to feel like you don't know others, you don't even know yourself, and the difficulties and the challenges. So dear Sam is going to have some very special help with that. And it begs the question, which many of you are asking right now. You say, but do I have that kind of help? Do I have these beautiful beings who come here not to tell me what to do, not to improve my life for me, but to help me keep a balance? Do I have these? And the answer is yes, if you choose, if you are ready for some real changes in your life, not just little improvements, not just getting rid of the blemishes or being able to pay your bills, but I'm talking about true changes in your life. Going back to the knowingness, and the realization of that deep knowingness that you've already had, always had within yourself, but you disguised it, you covered it over, you distracted yourself from that knowingness that you had when you were 7 years old and when you were 14 years old, just like Sam. But you ran from it, or you covered it up. And then you come around asking for little changes and improvements, a little better car, a little better house. Oh, no, you're not going to get 3 escorts for that, no. But when you're ready, like Sam is, for the deep, deep, deep changes that go beyond being an ordinary or even just a little bit extraordinary human into a true divine walking master, then yes, they will be there. As will Tobias, as I already am, and as many others will be. Yes. Even though you're not 14 years old anymore, even though you say, but I'm not an ascended master coming back for embodiment, it is no different. There's nothing different about Sam than there is about you, other than maybe a few little years. Maybe perspective, perception, maybe just the way you're thinking. Maybe you too are this grand being, as grand as Sam, or maybe grander. Maybe you too have this soul who loves you so much, is ready to do anything for you, as long as you allow it. I'm talking about quantum allowing. I'm not just talking a little allowing. I'm talking allowing like you've never allowed before, allowing you to be you again. Your soul gave your soul, yourself, you, freedom, and you took it. And you played with it, and you had fun with it, and you experienced it. And you always have it. It's never taken away. You gave yourself, my dear soul, you gave yourself this thing called the human aspect, and you gave it its freedom. And when you, human aspect, and when you, soul, are ready to look each other in the eyes, the metaphorical eyes, the symbolic eyes, with the intensity and the love and the compassion and the honor and respect for each other that Sam and Tobias will have, that's when there's this melding, that's when there's this integration, and that's when you kind of a big smile on your face and say, you're a walking, embodied master as well. That's when you come to know Sam. That's when you really have that deep connection. That's when many of you may even meet him person to person, but definitely have the opportunity to meet him in the other realms. You see, Sam Sam, as much as he loves and honors others, cannot stand the feeding. Sam cannot energetically handle the torture that humans put themselves and others through. So he stayed to himself. Time with himself, that deep dive into himself, has ultimately allowed him to keep his energies pure, to keep from others from feeding on him, and to keep from him ever being a feeder, an abuser. He's gone inside for a deep look at himself, like you have also done with yourself. A deep look to see, who am I? Ultimately, coming to the answer, I am that I am. One day, Sam will say, I am Sam, and so much more. I am that I am. I am my soul. I am the I am that I am. So Sam enters a new period, a new era of his life, coming to terms that he can go about his everyday human business. He can go to school. He can do yard work. He can start dating pretty soon. He can do the things that other humans do, the things that get him through the day. But he can also now start letting this other part of himself out, the part that has mystical and very real experiences. It wasn't a UFO when he was walking home recently. It was a portal, you might call it. It was an energy that was always there. But he didn't realize it until just the other night. It was an experience that he could have ignored, he could have walked away from. But thank goodness he embraced. So, my dear friends, that's where Sam is. Where are you? I am that I am, Адамус, in loving service to all who are choosing embodied enlightenment, no matter what, in full allowing in this lifetime. I love you dearly. And Sam, I love you deeply. And so it continues to be